Right. So that brings up the point of, what we don't really know at this point what it's going to take to bring the theater back online, or at least that section of the building, because it's not just the room, it's kind of around the room as well.
Earlier, what I studied was done a number of years ago, and it came back with like a $14 million figure. If you hear that number, don't get scared, because part of that was breaking out the back wall, totally expanding the stage and everything, replacing all the seats at once. It was just a very, very aggressive thought process by the people that were involved. We could have a good theater without going to that major expense and have it very attractive. So don't be scared by that big number.
So one of the things I was also thinking is that I'm going to assume that the building's infrastructure is being taken care of. Now, we may be frozen in place waiting for certain something or other in the building to actually happen. Sprinkler system, for example, if there's some issue with that, you can't move into the building without it, or fire alarm system or whatever. But I think from our perspective, I'm hoping the facilities group can handle figuring all that out and getting it up and running. What our charge is to make sure that we're coordinating our needs and wants kind of with that group to say, okay, if we're going to push for the theater going first, then could you please concentrate on that wing of the building and tell us what it's going to take to get that up and running. As Mayor Stortz has said, I think we do have an opportunity for public or for some private investment money in this regard as well. I know Councilwoman Zappo said, we have to go out and kind of find a little bit of money, or financial. We have to consider financing in the discussion about the use cases. Certainly there are a lot of things that could go into the building itself, and as those of you, we have several floors to deal with. I believe the building is about 100,000, it's a little under 100,000 square feet, but I believe that the usable square footage is probably in the neighborhood of 65,000 or maybe 70,000 square feet, spread out in various fashions depending on the floor you're on.
Jim, you put up $5 million. We'll name it the Jim Albert Auditorium.
Who do I write the check out to?
How about Royal Albert Hall?
Yeah, Royal Albert Hall. No, that's been taken. So.
Actually, one of my thoughts was to have it called the Veterans Memorial Auditorium.
Yeah, you have a comment, please. You want to come up to the microphone?
Yep.
Unless you have a military voice.
I do. Kim Valenti, 387 Brewster Road. I would like to propose that maybe this group designate a few people who could go and speak with the board of the Ridgefield Playhouse. If you've never been there, it is a beautiful operating theater that was part of a school, and they renovated it. And I would like to know how they did it. I would like to know what committee was formed, how they went and solicited funds, how they afforded to do this. And I think we can learn a lot from them if we do that, and I think they would probably be happy to talk to us. I actually reached out to someone a couple of years ago about this, and I just think that they could very much shed some light on what that process would be. Has anyone been there?
I think it's a very good idea. We also might want to consider going to Thomaston and Goodspeed to see how their stage area is, because they're not overly large either.
No, but it's a different situation. Those theaters were existing theaters. Thomaston, for instance, was an existing theater. Ridgefield Playhouse was a school, and they actually made that gymnasium into a theater. So, and I'm sure they had to raise a lot of money to do it. So the question is, how did they do it?
Do you know how long ago that was?
I don't, but I've been there a couple of times, and it is a beautiful theater. It doesn't have the historical aspect that we have. We have an existing theater. I believe what they did is took a portion of the school gymnasium and made it into a theater.
The last 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, I think it's definitely been longer than 5 years.
Okay, so like the current architecture or anything. So it's not a real recent project. Okay.
No, but And that's another thing. I think that if you want this theater to be profitable and not just be renting space to Bristol Theater Arts or Bristol Choral Society, they're only going to use that theater for certain times of the year. The Ridgefield Playhouse, they have big name acts that come through there. They have, I mean, it runs like the Bushnell would run on a much, much smaller scale. And I think you're going to have to look at having a professional running theater company, whether we approach the Waterbury Theater and have our theater go under their umbrella as a smaller sister theater to them. That also was looked at. I know that they came out and looked at the theater, and I think there was some interest in it. But I don't think the town wants to be in the business of running a theater. I think the theater industry itself is an industry unto itself, and I think if you want to make it profitable and also have it open to the local groups around town, you need to have an organization that specializes in running a theater and, you know, can do promotion, do advertising, book the acts. You know, that's really what you need. And whether we go under that umbrella of the Waterbury Theater as an example, or whether we hire a company like whoever is running the Ridgefield Playhouse, I mean, all you have to do is go on their website and look at the amount of activity in that theater. And they also have to do fundraising. You know, as with any arts, ticket prices alone are not going to sustain the theater. You're going to have annual fund campaigns and donations and corporate sponsors and that kind of thing.
Are you around?
Yes, they are year-round. Yes, they are. Yep. So my recommendation would be, and I would like to serve on that, if you pull together a few groups, because I am an artist.
My next question.
Yeah, I know a couple of people that would, and I certainly would. I would love to go out there if we contact them and say, listen, board, you know, can we sit down and talk to you about how you approached this project and who's running your theater, and, you know, how was it profitable and how did you do the renovation? And, you know, I think they could really help us a lot.
Great idea.
There is,
Thank you, Kim.
on the Memorial Boulevard Task Force, there is an article about a former Niagara Falls High School that converted into an arts cultural center. I haven't had the opportunity to read through that. I was looking through some of the other things. But that might be another group that we reach out to, because that might be a little more recent.
I have read through that one too, and it's almost a carbon copy of our school. So I think one of the things that we wanted to do, since I think the theater is going to have a lot of spin to its own, is identify people who would like to be serving on that subgroup of the subgroup, to specifically look at the issues around the theater. And you've mentioned a number of them, which is, you know, who's going to manage the theater, you know, who's going to be there to sell tickets, get acts, all of that. There was a gentleman and his wife that went through the tour. I don't see him in the room. They went through today, and he's with the theater in New Britain, which used to be in Deep River. So he's had a lot of years of Sean, yeah, thank you. And he mentioned, and then there's the group up in Norfolk that works a lot with the group in Torrington, which works with a group in Thomaston. So you're absolutely right. That community kind of spins to itself. And if we are part of that circuit, a lot of times they do book acts based on availability and the size of the venue and that kind of thing. And we should not stand alone. I don't think Bristol should be standing alone in that. You know, why would we? We wouldn't have access to everything that they have access to. So those of you, I think, who want to work specifically on the theater and aren't necessarily involved in, let's say, a museum or visitor center or business incubators or education or whatever other things, then please come up. I want to have a separate sign-up sheet, and then I'll need someone to volunteer to chair that group as well. Maybe it's you, Kim, or Dave, or anybody. I think we're not going to be short on expertise in that area, which is a really, really good thing.
Ironically, the usage will lead into the financial, how we're going to use it, and how we're going to use it to determine how much we have to renovate the theater to make it reasonable.
Yeah, and where's that money going to come from? There's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to the theater, but that is a spin to its own to a great degree, and I think the rest of the building can be spun in a separate way with a separate group, with myself, for example.
Sure.
I was just going to suggest that we might want to go out into our community and find, not only just for theater, but somebody who's involved musically from a choral group or a band group, so that, you know, it's not just designed for theatrical events, but can maintain the acoustics for a good choral or a band performance, as well as we have a lot of dance schools that go out of town to rent property for their dance recitals, including my daughter's dance school, that because there wasn't a venue in town. And that we have somebody from that venue also on this subgroup, so that we can make sure we represent what their needs are too, so that it becomes multi-purpose and can be rented week after week and is not, you know, a vacant, empty shell on weekends or whichever.
Dave Mills, 185 Oakland Street. We talked about funding. Should one of the first things we considered is forming a 501(c)(3) somehow, so that if people are going to make donations, obviously they want to be tax deductible. Right,
Yes.
Bill? That's critical. So that might be something that is done as quickly as possible. I know when the chamber had looked at it, they did have a 501(c)(3) that they had available, and that might be something that you could still look at under that umbrella. I think the other things that we need to look at, and I know this is part of the facilities group, but ADA compliant. Obviously, do we need to be ADA compliant? If so, how much, where, what, etc.
And when.
And when, right? I mean, so do we need to get the building inspector there now, or the fire inspector, or whomever from the city to look and say, this is what you need? I mean, I think we need to get that answer immediately, because that's going to be a cost, and that's, if we're going to have to open the place, or we want to open it soon, if that's going to be a major cost, then we need to know that as soon as possible. I think the other things that need to be done, I mean, once you get ADA compliant, I think we just need a list from the building inspector as to what do we need. Maybe it's something minor. Obviously, there's some peeling paint, things like that. It'll take money to paint the place. Certainly, cleaning it up, etc. It should not cost a tremendous amount of money. I mean, if I know that as of last Veterans Day, they had a program there that they ran, that the city ran. So I assumed that it was okay for the veterans and people to go into that theater, but let's find out what it's going to take to get us in there immediately. And then I think it's a matter of just looking at those needs and filling them as rapidly as possible. And just looking at it, obviously, everybody's been in there. I think ADA is probably the major thing.
One of the big ones, yeah.
Right.
That's the major. Maybe the heating system is another
Yeah.
one that needs work.
Yeah, and I know that the cooling system obviously needs to have some work. And as I recall, when I checked a year or so ago, that cooling system is important for the gym area also, because somehow that cooling system works on the gym and keeps the moisture out of the gym area, because we don't want to get a mold problem. But again, that's something that if you check with someone from the schools, they would probably have those answers for you. But I would think if we can just get those answers, talk about a funding mechanism, something where people can donate money, I think that can get us off the ground and get us going. And I think those are things that could be 30 days. We should be able to get those answers, I would think, if we put our foot to the metal, pedal to the metal rather. And
How long have you been here?
well, again, this is an outside agency that's going to get us these answers at least. I mean, at least we can go and seek the answers. We may not like the answers, and then of course you'll have to go through all of the hoops to get it done, but at least you can have an idea as to what's going to be done by that time. So
that's why I said, thank you, Dave. That's why I said I think we need to coordinate what we want to have happen in the shortest term with the facilities group, so that they can move in that direction along with us and get that going. Because if they're going to worry about the whole building, then we will be here for many, many years worrying about the whole building.
I think everybody's got to be creative, come up with some ideas that Jim hasn't thought of, or I haven't thought of. One of my favorite ones is possibly getting the tech school to have their culinary institute down there, okay? It's just a thought, but we're counting on you people to come up with ideas that we haven't thought of, okay? To make it all more functional and usable and successful.
I do think the groups that are in there is a whole list of other things besides the theater that would be appropriate for that building. We can kind of spin into that one, but I think right now we just want to get started, and I think the starting foot is off with the theaters. Sure.
Well, I'll let this, since he's standing, oh, it's your dad. I'll let you go first since you're standing, but nobody else.
I'm dad.
Okay.
But no, I just
Your
want
name,
to...
Reno.
Time to...
No, I'm not going to speak to...
But you have to give us your name and your address for the
Reno
record.
Albert, and I live in Bristol, Connecticut.
1389 Stafford Avenue.
Okay. And the only thing I want to mention is that one of the things we forget here is how many people graduated from this school in the last 50, 60, 70
Including
years.
my mother.
You know, we did something in our schools, in our church, that nobody thought we could do. We needed $400,000 to $300,000, and the nature of our church now, they're all over 70 years old. And we had a big meeting about this, like we have here, and I said, we'll raise the money. And they thought I was nuts. So what happened is that they broke us up. We did what we had to do. Could you believe that we raised over $435,000? What we did is that everybody that give us money, if you go to St. Anne's Church, it's all in the bank place of the people who give. And it was amazing. And we collected 98% of it. So people thought we weren't even going to get close to $200,000. So please go back to the people who graduated. Not, you don't shame them, just tell them that if you contribute X amount of dollars, your name will be on the plaque. And I'll tell you, it works.
Bring that up to the financial group when they start working on the money.
Well,
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I know we're focusing really on the thing, but when we put a new heating unit in that building, it's going to be sized to service the entire facility. And I think what we really need to do is, before any funds are spent or allocated, there needs to be a full blown-out plan as to what will be done with the other properties and whether or not they will be revenue producing or a cost avoidance or such, because it all fits into the payback analysis of all the money that has to be spent. That doesn't mean that if the third floor is a phase 3, it's not done for 3 years, but it's a plan as to what will happen with those properties so that can all economically be built into a model. I think we've got a wonderful opportunity here to make this whole building into a unique area that other communities don't have, and attracting artists and musicians and various theater groups and that are looking for property to either have a retail shop or have a studio or have things that can produce revenues and rents. And so, along with the Parks Department using part of the building, we've really got to iron out what revenues will offset the cost, not only to cover the capital investment, but the ongoing operating costs of the facility, and before the first dime is spent. And I know we talk about wanting to get the theater going, but if we don't have a viable plan for the rest of the building, the theater alone is not going to support the whole project.
Thank you. Mr. Rich.
Richard Rich, 100 Alba Drive, Bristol. I've had my imaginings and my vision in my head for quite some time, and it falls in line with what a lot of other folks are thinking. I do agree that looking into whether the theater can be reoccupied and reused is a great idea, because visibility and getting more community support is going to be a great idea and an important idea for this project. So if it's possible that we can use it and can get people in there to see it, folks, and there are a lot of folks on the tour that had not been there before and did not go to school there, and they were impressed. So getting more Bristolites in there to do that, I think, is a great idea. I do, though, have to say, though, I think that from a logistical, practical standpoint, I had a gut guess, we're probably going to find it an easier time putting people in office space before we're going to be allowed to have the public in there. That's just a gut feeling. So I don't have any, it's anecdotal at this point, but I'm just going to say it anyways. And that if we need to swing that way, I think the higher order is beginning use. And if you couldn't get people in the theater, but we were allowed to rent space down the hall, and if the chamber were to go there, if some other organizations were to go there, if we could start having artists, have artist studios there, then that's where to begin if that proved easier, because using it, creating revenue, having people in and out is critical. You know, the main floor, I imagine, that's the space that the public would see or access most readily. If the chamber is in there, other organizations, if there's a veterans organization, support organization in there, they'd have offices on the first floor. I'd like to see an art gallery down in the where the library is that would show artwork and things of that nature from our craftsmen in the building, and possibly a smaller gallery as well. And there'd also be flexible space, so it becomes meeting space as well when there isn't a display in there. I think the gymnasium needs to remain a flex space as well. There are a lot of uses for the city right away. Like Ellen said, the Parks Department, I think it becomes a small performance venue in the round. Some of you might remember that there were fixed seats in the balcony around the perimeter up above, and that might be, you know, something that you put back to have seating on both levels. And also, like we've been going on or talking about the business incubator, I think there's a big need. There's more entrepreneurs than ever, and I believe they are driving our economy in ways that most of us don't even fathom. It's a different time now, and to accommodate the business incubator, those low-cost places for people to start businesses. My son, he's a designer. He has a business going out of one of our bedrooms of our house, and he would love to not be there and not have to get up and go back down the hall to his work. He'd love to come to a place like that. And also just think of this idea of the arts and the business incubator mixed. We might think of them as separate things, but these things are becoming more integrated in our economy in a different way. They are working with each other in ways that are very different. And so some of the new workspaces that younger individuals want to work in is mixed, and there are different things going on there, and it creates a different vibe and a different feel. And they don't want to work where I worked, started out in the factory, like a lot of us did a long time ago. They're looking for something different, and I think that's the thing that we would need to provide.
I think certainly there's a lot of potential uses.
Sure.
You know, I think what this group's going to have to do, though, is meet separate from the task force.
Yeah.
For those of you who can make it, you know, so we'll come up with times and go with that. And then again, like you said, probably break into a group that's going to focus on what's it going to take to get the theater and the arts community. I agree with you that it should not just be the theater. It could be that entire floor could be the arts community, for example, or something.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the building can be brought to, and I do understand what Cheryl is saying about, you know, you want to make sure you have at least an idea what you want to do with the rest of the building, so that you're not going into it blindly and suddenly you end up with this huge expense. I think one of the things we got back from the public very strongly was to not put residential into that building. Right?
Yeah,
so I think if everybody remembers that one.
Yeah.
So I think as long as we don't do that, that does reduce certain things we have to spend on the building. So I think we're just going to have to kind of like work our way through to get to the fine tooth is going to take an awful lot of not fine tooth to get to it. So I think the one thing we know for sure is going to happen is the theater is going to be there. That's why another thing is like, well, if we start there, then everybody agrees to that, and then as we start there, and we can start talking about, okay, who's going to go in the library, who's going to go in the gymnasium, who's going to go in the cafeteria, who's going to go on the third floor in the home ec room and the oral room, and all those things. And the good news is it's a big building, so we can accommodate a lot of people.
We can't forget the veterans. There's some use of that building for veterans.
There's a much greater need for that, and we have a lot of returning veterans, and I think...
As well as Veterans Museum and military history and the like, which should maintain the function of the boulevard basically too. You talk about a tourist center there.
In fact, we want to start a Veterans Chamber of Commerce for the state of Connecticut and house it there, for example. It's not a huge group, but it's a big enough group that they need room, so...
But it'll give us some focus too.
And I have to say, my suggestion for naming the theater would be the Albert Rockwell Theater. So that's my recommendation.
I like that idea.
So, and then we can call it The Rock for short, which I think is really cool.
Great, thank you. Michelle?
Time's up.
Yeah, I'm waiting for everybody to come back in, but we'll have to come up with time. We'll have to come up with meeting times to go into the details. This is a conversation that's going to go on well beyond the 25 minutes we were allowed.
Well, this will be quick. Michelle Boyko, 86 Prospect Street. Again, I have two suggestions. One concerns raising funds, and one concerns cutting costs. I'm currently in the process of kickstarting a project, partially. This is a brand new site, 4 years old, relatively brand new, and it involves social media, and it goes worldwide. And that's just a suggestion. We can get money going right away, and it can come from anywhere in the world. You might have an art enthusiast who went through the same issue in Nova Scotia, somebody in Australia. We could start getting money in right away within 60 days, and I'd be more than happy to help on setting up that site. I don't know if you've ever heard of, just Google Kickstarter. Two young guys out of Manhattan started 4 years ago. It's sponsored hundreds, thousands of very successful projects around the world. So not just limited to Bristol. I think if we just tap into Bristol, if we get 60,000 people in Bristol donating $5 each, we have a chunk of money right there. But also with Kickstarter, you can graduate the donations and have perks associated with each one, and ultimately, one would be like a plaque in somebody's name at a certain amount level, and this way you could have, the little people, feel part of it, and so that's a great way to get money right away. The cost-cutting issue concerns being involved in Bristol Rising. I found that if Bristol residents get excited about something, they will turn out and they will volunteer. And I would be the first one to volunteer to help sweep, clean, paint, and that would save a lot of money right there. And you could also tap into people, plumbers, electricians, can you just donate a day here and there? And so those are just a couple of suggestions.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, so, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Sean West, 53 Lancaster Road.
He wants to make a railroad station out of it.
No, he wants housing.
No housing. Actually, I was pleased to hear that there were some suggestions about using it for a Veterans Center over there, which is one of my ideas. It is part of Veterans Park. I think it's essential that we do that. And we really don't do enough for our veterans here in the country. They go out and they risk their lives, and they get retirement plans that aren't as good as city officials. So basically, that area over there, I also have some reservations about the viability of a theater, because many communities are not able to make ends meet, and as a result, the state of Connecticut is bailing out, for example, Rensselaer Field, which is a brand new development, which is built on our tax dollars, and it's now become a hole in the economy. I think Bruce Springsteen was the only person that ever showed up there that anybody could name, and it's been football games. Another example is the Palace Theater. They just needed to do some repairs to their roof, and they had some interior work that had to be done. I don't have the facts and figures with me because I can't spend all my time doing research, but I can bring that back to the table. I think we really need to take a look at the economic viability of the theater itself and take that into a different perspective as the rest of the building. We can attack the rest of the building and try to make it sustainable economically in a different way. We can rent some offices maybe. I heard Renaissance is looking for a new place. I'm not suggesting that we give them the building or anything, but that's just an example of one office that we can put in there. We should definitely designate one part of that building that's going to be self-sustaining. It's not going to run off of subsidies from the taxpayers. I have no problem with if you want to have an incubator in there, that's fine. But balance it with something that's bringing revenue in so that it's not all lopsided. I'm also concerned about what kind of subsidies are going to be used for the building, because there are strings attached to some subsidies. I think we need to do a detailed analysis of the finances of that aspect before we designate exactly what the building is going to be used for as an end use. We're trying to start at the end of the project and work our way to the beginning, and we're going to back ourselves into a corner if we do that. And a lot of Bristol taxpayers just can't afford to do that. And same for the state of Connecticut. We're really in some sad shape.
Well, this building has to be...
One of the things, Sean, is that the theater, make money or not make money, is a subjective aspect of it also. The other benefits to the city by having the theater there. Other businesses will benefit. That's going to be hard to quantify.
Absolutely. I mean, and like you said, we don't have to fix everything right up front either, but $14 million is still $14 million, whether you do it now or you do it over the course of 10 years. But financing it is another thing. Now, if you're going to jump into it and you're going to totally restore the theater and get it on board, and I'm glad that somebody said that they knew a little bit about what's going on in other theaters, so we can do a little bit of research and get some feedback in that aspect. But let's not put that on top of this too, because we don't really need to do that. We can get our foot in the door. We can start to bring a little bit of revenue in there and make our investments a little bit at a time and not get
That's
too far ahead of
$14
ourselves.
million included breaking down the back wall and expanding that whole area, which doesn't have to be done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in theater seats, I mean, you don't need to replace all of them right off the hop either. You don't know if you're going to have a theater even half full over there.
Yeah,
But we can also incorporate, our own arts groups, and on top of that, you never know, we might end up with our own theater group here in Bristol. And
We already have one.
well, I mean, we could promote it, and we can sell tickets right here and put a portion of that towards the proceeds of restoring the theater, rather than just relying on tax subsidies to do it. You know what I'm saying?
I think
I
it's...
don't think anyone's, for me, I'm not talking about tax subsidies at this point. I'm talking about
Well,
looking to
we
see
should-
how
we
other
should-
people have done it first.
Well, we need to think about the economic sustainability of the project at the same
I don't
time.
think anybody's not saying that.
Right. This is not going to be a burden on the taxpayers. What we just look at what revenues can come in from a theater, what revenues can come in from rentals. It may be a fronted up cost that ultimately return back, but it has to be a building that can carry its weight. We can't put this all on the backs of the taxpayers to say, hey, go spend these millions of dollars, and we're going to, if it doesn't return an investment, who cares? We've got to do our job right to make sure that the building is recovered, the building has a purpose, but it's not going to be something we all think. I can't think of the cliche of what you call something you put the money into and it just,
Not viable.
Well, no, there's another word I'm thinking of, but we just can't be doing that.
Looking like a true Board of Finance chairperson.
That's right.
So the building's costing the city about $200,000 a year to maintain it as is, but if it was actually used, it would cost more, because you would have more lights, you'd have more heat, you'd have more
Right.
water. So
I'm
you do have to concentrate on thinking of probably, $400,000, $300,000 as an annual revenue stream just to break even.
Maybe we can expand on the ladies talk about Richfield as to how that town benefited by the theater outside the theater itself.
Well,
They may have an idea of
Have you seen
the benefits.
Have you seen the Niagara?
I haven't.
I want you to read it. They posted it online.
Yeah.
It is a blueprint and a mirror image of the theater that we have, and it outlines exactly how this town, a very blue-collar town, rallied around this theater with the support of the city and the mayor, and what they were able to accomplish. And you will be amazed.
Doug, you're talking about Niagara Falls, Right.
Niagara Falls Performing Arts Center. They did an enormously good job of it.
So, I mean,
It's a blue-collar town. Read the study. Read it.
that's a tourist destination.
It might be a tourist destination, but the people have a lot more things to go do than to go to a playhouse. So it's harder to build a facility like this when there are a lot of other attractions and natural wonders. So if they were made successful, and actually it's on the United States side, which isn't as built up as the Canadian side, you know.
Read the study. It was not a great area. It was a school that was going to be torn down. It was, just read it. I think you'll get a different
I will.
perspective.
I'm not going to knock the theater down.
No. I think you'll be a little more inspired about what we can do as a community if you read that study and how they went about doing it, because it is kind of a blueprint of what we can do.
I'm just looking at the other theaters in the state, and from the financial aspect, it's become difficult and impossible
The
for
arts
some
in general
communities
are like that.
All right.
If everybody
We can't have a sidebar like this for too much longer, so Mr. Mills.
Just to address Sean's point, Dave Mills, 185 Oakland Street. I think the unique thing about our situation, that's different than the Warren Theater, that's different than the Palace Theater, that's different from the Thomaston Opera House, is that we have the potential on the other side of the building, away from the theater, to make that into a profit center. Most of these other places rely totally on ticket sales or fundraising to make the theater go. We're going to have 40 rooms, hopefully, that we'll be able to rent out, that will bring in income. That'll pay for the heat, it'll pay for the lights. There may be some things that we need to do for the theater to improve it, with whether it be seating or whether it be flooring or whether it be painting. But the difference is that you have the opportunity to raise money on the other side. So that is key. I mean, that's the difference of this facility. That's totally different from the Palace Theater and the others that I mentioned. So if we keep that in mind, obviously we want the theater, but we have to develop that economic engine on the other side. And that's exactly what we have to do.
I think we might want to consider putting theater in the same perspective as a ball field, okay? It attracts people, and the surrounding area benefits. While the ball field may not pay for itself, we got many more businesses that are now successful because of the people that's attracted to the town.
The other thing that Andy talked about and I've talked about before, I mean, we have an opportunity to create another destination. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is create a destination for artists, for people who enjoy the arts, for people who enjoy music, for people who enjoy dance. I mean, it's another place to go to in Bristol. Okay, and all the things that you're talking about, Bill, with those people that we attract, obviously those are ancillary things that we come. We don't have that many attractions that we can create. Okay, we're not going to create a Niagara Falls out of the Quabbin River, but we can create something where people are going to come. Maybe they want to come down and take art lessons in the building. Maybe they want to take quilting lessons. Maybe they want to take cooking. I mean, there's a number of things that can happen there. But for us to not take advantage of developing this destination, I think that, you know, we're foolish to not even think about it.
I think the message is that as we look at potential use cases, we have to look at their potential revenue streams.
Absolutely.
Right? So you can be benevolent to a certain degree, but you can't be giving away the farm, as I think Cheryl was saying.
You can't look at direct revenues only.
Correct. But I mean, if you're looking for something that people might want to donate to, I mean, that's the theater that people might want to donate. They may not want to donate to a classroom.
That's the heart of the building.
Exactly. But they may want to donate to the theater. If there's something, there's a fundraiser, put an elevator in, great.
Okay. We can get some offices up and running much quicker than we can get the theater. So
I think that might be correct too. Is again, the spin putting in the theater activity is not going to be the only thing. I think myself personally, I'll be worrying more about the rest of the building, because I know that the theater's in good hands with people that are going to do that, and I'll be looking very quickly to put people in there, including maybe myself. But you know, the building still, we have to still assume that the facility people have gotten to the code poise so that we can get people in there with legal issues
Right.
aside and fire marshal issues aside and all of those things. So it's going to take a little while, and it will take a while, I believe, for the building to break even and cover its cost. It's not going to happen day one. Unlikely it'll happen day one. It might take a ramp-up period of some sort to get there. The city right now is covering the whole cost, so we have nothing but gain to give to the city to say we're going to slowly reduce those costs of the city's maintenance of that. We do have to talk about, at some point we have to talk about public and private. If we move all of these public offices in, well, your idea of making sure this is a revenue center just stopped.
Exactly.
Unless we charge the city to rent space there at market rates, or maybe at a benevolent market rate.
One of the differences there is we have a facility, and we consider moving down there, youth services. They have their own building maintained by the city, okay? Move them to the boulevard. You could sell that building for offices and get money to rent from, or tax revenue from that building, but then have them in the city building. That's the type of thing that we're looking for from everybody.
Good. Looks like the other groups are done. Are you leaving?
Not too happy.
I saw our chairperson walk out the door. Hopefully she's coming back.
Yes, it's fine.
I assume we're going to be out briefing each other, as Councilwoman Zappo mentioned. So,
May I speak?
Cheryl, if you give your name and your address, you're allowed to speak.
Okay, I don't know how formal or informal these meetings are, and I tend to be informal and interrupt.
This is the use cases group, so
Okay.
we're sticking to those types of related topics.
Oh, use cases, so we're talking about the theater at this point?
And other things. We've talked about other things as well.
Okay, from the historic preservation point.
Can I have your name and
My name is Cheryl Barb, 52 Bellwood Gardens Drive, Bristol, Connecticut.
Now, is this the brief from the historic group? Are you? No. Okay.
No, I just wanted to say I wanted to try to have a chance to get over to the places where people were discussing the theater and just say this one thing.
Yes.
That there are many theaters that around that are historic theaters that have certain special features, and that I would hope that the people that are talking about the theater realizes that there's a preservation component to that, and that somehow we can get a theater person that deals with historic theaters to have input into that group. And I'm not an expert in theaters per se, or what is special about particular historic theaters, but I think this is one of the most significant rooms in the building, as you have suggested, and that we need that input from that kind of specialty view of what a historic theater ought to look like, et cetera, et cetera. And that would go a long way into if we're pursuing a state register or national register nomination as to this interior part of the building. That would like really turn them on at the preservation office.
Yeah, we did talk about tying ourselves into theater people from around the area.
Around the area, but from the preservation component wise.
Right.
Thank you.
I think we called them real theater people. All right. Oh, we had a spirited goodbye.
Julie Norton, 73 Queen Street.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. I was just thinking, like, on a much smaller scale that won't cost a lot of money, if maybe initially just to kind of get things going in the theater could be as simple as a movie night, and that just may mean investing in a nice screen, and just kind of making sure the sound system is decent.
I think they're actually there already.
Oh, okay.
I think there is.
Because I think they had Beauty and the Beast or something there recently, so it shouldn't be too bad a shape. The play, yeah. I don't know. I mean, they just had the OM show, but I mean, there's a lot of smaller things that could be done just to kind of kickstart and get things going in there.
I think that's a great discussion for the theater group when they decide how this is going to work out.
Are you done?
Well,
One more.
I just have one little, I haven't done the research on this or anything, but maybe there's some technical schools that are into production and lighting and sound and all that kind of stuff, and they might be able to teach there and fix it.
Plus, there are some schools I've talked to, like Tunxus, that may want to expand its programs to include arts programs and manufacturing education programs and other things that could go into that building as well. So, one last one, and then we have to wrap up and turn it over.
Rich, can you get the
Just an addendum.
other group to come back?
Michelle.
Michelle Boyko again, 86 Prospect Street. Anyhow, a quick addendum to what I was talking about, that crowdfunding site Kickstarter, is the SEC is now working, and it may happen within the month, to make those donations, not just clearly donations, but equity-based. So I implore the panel to go look up Kickstarter.com, and you'll see what they're doing. But I'm personally involved in it, and I'm being kept up to speed on a daily basis what's happening with the SEC. And if that happens, you know, everything becomes a donation for anybody that, and again, you're going worldwide with this. Okay, thank you.
Good. Thanks, Michelle. Councilwoman.
Okay. We went 25 minutes past my limit, so hopefully that means that we had some spirited conversation.
Big talkers.
So I chaired the smallest group in the executive room. We had 5 members come in, and we talked about historic preservation issues. So the summary that I'd like to present to the larger group is that we believe that the building is historic, that the facade should be preserved, and we think that there's many opportunities that exist for funding. We think that there is a private investment component, so it's interesting to hear about the Kickstarter, which I think could be something that we would like to pursue. There's the potential of tax credits, there's the potential of matching grants, and there's fundraising opportunities. All of this can be linked and likened to listing the building on either the state register or the national register as somewhat of a portal. Once you do that, the doors do tend to open with additional funding sources that you do not have access to if you do not have that listing. However, that listing could take a significant amount of time because there's a lot of research that's involved. But we would like to put forward from our small working group that we feel that that's something worthy of pursuing, and we would like the task force as a whole to entertain pursuing that and getting a fixed cost as to what that would be, to see what it would be for someone to do that nomination for us. We'd also like to invite members of the historic preservation community at the state level to come in and eyeball the building, whether from a suggestion standpoint or just letting them know and be in the loop about what we're doing. There's people in Hartford and at the Connecticut Trust, which is based in Hamden, that we would like to bring in to the conversation. And I think that that's all that we're doing for now. Those are our recommendations. Yes, Cheryl?
I have a question. If they're, you started by saying preserve the facade and so forth, but do they ever limit your uses of what you do in the building if you still preserve the architectural thing? So,
no.
Okay.
You know, there's a certain level of minutia which we started to get into that involves the listings, and there's also a lot of people who believe that it is akin to what a local historic district is. So in Bristol, in certain areas, if you want to do something to your street side facade, you do have to get a certificate of appropriateness. The National Register and the state registers do not do that. You follow the Department of Interior, so they're not going to let us put aluminum siding on the boulevard. However, as far as usage issues, it's not an issue, especially because it's been so changed anyway inside for the use of the school. And I think part of our charge will be to change some of those perceptions about what the historic listing is versus what it really means. Okay. Frank, are you ready, or do you need time to make notes?
No, I got it.
Okay.
We're very fortunate.
We've got 3 new volunteers for our building committee. And fortunately, they all have significant history with the building. I mean, this is really outstanding. So with that, you know, we sort of put together an outline, one of which is to really just develop a complete list of the operational systems. Now, you know, we're all concerned about the heat, we're all concerned about the cool, but in discussing the building itself,
certainly we don't want to forget about the outside of the building. As we went around today, we saw a lot of rust and other kinds of things, and first impressions are very important, so we might want to do a lot of things inside, but we also want to consider the outside. But there's other kinds of systems beside the heating and the cooling, like the system that keeps the basement and sub-basement dry. Evidently, there's a great deal of water in that area, and there's a complete system that sort of pumps all of this water that's collected in a complete collection system. So it's just another system we have to be concerned about and make sure it's operational. And something I'll be checking with Public Works tomorrow. But again, putting together a complete list of the systems and starting to work from there. But beyond that, our 3 new members have a lot of other contacts. I have my own contacts, so we're going to be doing some recruiting within the city. Hopefully, we have architects, we have engineers of various types looking to bring on more people on the committee and start working.
All hands on deck, definitely.
Does that committee or subcommittee include the outside?
Yes, we plan to include the outside of the building. Not the parking lot, not the grounds, but the physical outside of the building.
But not the grounds?
Right.
Any other comments for that report?
I'd like to say something. Again, Cheryl Barr, 52 Belladine Gardens Drive, Bristol, Connecticut. When you talk about repairing or doing anything to the outside of the building, we're talking about a National Register nomination here, and I would just want to be assured that whatever architect or engineer that you bring in to treat the facade or whatever, it follows the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines, and that you have a consult with the State Historic Preservation Office, and the preservation architect reviews what you're doing.
Well, the intent right now of the committee is just to make lists.
Okay. I'm just saying that, trying to reinforce this, because sometimes the modern architects and the modern engineers are not sensitive to the design issues or whatever that is required for people that are trying to list things to the register, and it will do things that are inappropriate. I hear stories all the time.
And I think
I'm just jumping up now because it's late and I'm a little eavesdropping, so please don't take offense.
No, and I understand your concern, but the linkages between the groups that met and the sharing of information, I think, is going to prevent those types of errors from happening.
Okay, thank you.
Any other facility assessment observations, concerns, or questions? Okay, we'll move on to building use. I'm stealing my park and rec thing back because my kids need to register.
There you go. I have one also. So for the use cases, right, so we had a very stimulating conversation and was very much aware of the fact that we have a lot of potential use cases for the building. We kind of broke them into groupings, with the theater being the focus, as you had mentioned. And I believe that we will need a group that really focuses its attention on bringing the theater to life. That group was recommended to go and talk to other theaters, like the one in Ridgefield, and etc., and get an idea of how they went about it and how do they manage it, and it will require some sort of a management function if we get it up and running and that kind of thing. So the theater was one big spin of activity, and it will be going and doing its thing. Hopefully we'll either break out into separate meetings or we'll amend. We'll have the use case meetings and maybe start with the theater and move on to others. At the same time, it was pointed out, rightly so, that it might actually be quicker to fill some of the offices in that building if we were to open up the offices to other businesses. So one way or another, we decided that one, there should be a veterans focus in some of the building, and two, that we should definitely coordinate the use cases with the facility people to make sure that the enforcement activities and the costs associated with bringing the building up to speed are in tune with the use cases that we're talking about. So if we're going to focus, let's say, on the theater as our short-term goal, then the facility people should be looking at what does it take to get the theater up and running in a code legally liable, acceptable way. At the same time, we want to make sure we don't think of other use cases that are going to require something too much more than that. So we do believe that this group has to come up with at least general ideas of what else is going to go in the building so that the facilities group can work towards that goal. So we believe there's a lot of coordination and overlap between the use cases group and the facility group. We also believe that that financing is a critical component of the use cases and getting the building up to speed. And there's a lot of potential ways to do financing. As was brought out, there's a lot of emotional attachment by the citizens of Bristol to that building, and it would be likely successful if we had a fundraising campaign from the citizens of Bristol towards that building in some fashion or another. In addition, there would be potential private funding and naming opportunities and that kind of thing. Lastly, there is probably some public funding associated, but we have to be careful of what strings come with the public funding sources for those things, right? We do believe that we should find a 501 or create a 501c3. I think creating one is actually a time-consuming process, but we should have an avenue so people can donate to the renovation of this building in a tax-deductible, donatable kind of a way. So a 501c3 is kind of critical to that component as well. We did talk about the square footage, usable space. We did also talk about, in the financing, we talked about how the ultimate goal of the building is to be self-sustainable, economically viable, self-sustainable. It probably will take a while to get to that point, so the city is going to have to plan to keep funding some of it, and we anticipate that it'll just be a slow ramp-up period where the city costs will go down as the building's revenues go up. And hopefully